have an extra special guest for you who came in last minute, said he would do it. And if you don't know who he is, you really don't know how big of a treat it is to have him on. Mm-hmm. So he is the host of Flip Talk Radio. I don't know how many houses this guy's flipped. It's like the amount we flipped in our entire tenure, 180, like he does that like in a year, or more than that. Been in the game much longer than we have.
Definitely a mentor to us.
Been a mentor, friend, helped us through some very challenging areas in our business with raising private money and managing costs and scaling. He's been through the highs in real estate and the lows and multiple of both, and he knows how, and he's still here. And that's actually a huge testament, because there's a lot of investors doing a lot of courses out there and masterminds and guru programs and all kinds of things like that, and running Facebook ads, and they're millionaires today. And then like the next correction come around and they're gone and you'll never hear from them again. But that's not the guest we have tonight. He's been through it. He's gone through the mess, and he's still here thriving. So I'm going to turn it over to Don Costa. How are you?
I'm good, and I appreciate being the phone call when you need somebody to fill in. So I have to admit that when the market crashed last time, I was one of the people that disappeared for a minute, but I didn't disappear for long. So I have a couple ways that I can go with this. Q&A, I'm always really well open to do Q&A and just have conversations. So I also have a presentation that I had put together. I actually had it available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the presentation that I have. And basically it's the lessons I learned from 2008 and the crash 2008 and everything that happened to me from being, basically a bad business owner at that point in time. And then some of my thoughts about the current market we have. I'm going to share my screen here. So let me know if you can see my children there.
I see it. Oh,
okay. Perfect.
Your trophies.
They've grown. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So they're actually bigger now. The two boys are 15 and 16, and this little girl is 6. I think in the picture she's like 4 or 5. So I got to update my picture. So this is my why. We always have to have a why in everything we do. And these 3 wonderful kids are my reason for everything. So I always like to show and share them because they're a huge part of my story, a huge part of my journey, and a huge part of the reason why I get up every day to do what I do. So just a quick background on me. I have been real estate investing as an investor since 2003. I've been in this for 17 years. I started at door knocking pre-foreclosures, getting in my car, driving around with Microsoft Streets and Maps, basically printed out and flipping through paper, going door to door, and found that I was really good at getting a deal and making lots of money. And what happened was I made so much money so quickly that I thought that everything I touched turned to gold. And I started, doing different businesses, like some real estate related, like a real estate company, a mortgage company, a property management company, multiple offices with that. I opened a restaurant and nightclub. In fact, it's funny because yesterday there was a memory on Facebook. 9 years ago, yesterday, we closed that restaurant and nightclub. So 2011, August 31st, 2011, we closed that nightclub, which is crazy. But opened a restaurant and nightclub, did all kinds of crazy things. And when the market turned on all of us, I basically sunk like a rock. I fell, hard because, I thought that everything I touched turned to gold. I thought I couldn't be stopped. I thought that I couldn't, it couldn't end. And I got a huge wake up call. So October 8th, 2010, I actually posted this on Facebook. This is where I was starting to hit rock bottom. The last thing I had left was a restaurant and nightclub, which closed, not long after that, roughly 10 months or so after this, 11 months after this post, where I said I was struggling to pick a path. The restaurant was struggling. We were fighting the city over different permit issues. The economy was, as we know, the worst economy ever. I was out of money. I was playing Russian roulette with my lights, trying to keep them on, trying to keep my water on. My house was in and out of foreclosure. I was getting modifications on my home just to try to keep it. The banks were doing crazy things. Like they'd tell you you're not approved for modification, then send you an approval, but the payment would be more than you can afford. I mean, it was just ridiculous times. And I was really going through a hard time. And it's this memory on Facebook for me as a reminder of, just kind of where I landed. I was at rock bottom. I was so low at that point in time that I actually took my family to Taco Bell one time thinking I had money on a credit card and was going to take them to lunch at a movie. And I walked in to Taco Bell. I had my family order their food. It was roughly $20. I think it was around $20 or $22. And I went to pay for it and the card got declined. To this day, I still have PTSD when I go to pay for something, especially if somebody's with me. It's the weirdest thing. It's like this anxiety because, that moment just haunts me to this day. My card got declined. I asked the guy to run it again. I was certain I had money on the card, but when I checked my balance and it said $90. I didn't realize that available balance and actual balance are two different things, right? So the car got declined again, and I had to collect my family and leave the restaurant. And as entrepreneurs, we have this thick skin. We consider ourselves rhinos. I know a lot of entrepreneurs refer to themselves as rhinos. We're these powerful beings, right? Nothing can stop us. We swim upstream. That's just what we do. We're different from most of society, and we'll take the hits. So for me, it was just another thing, another hit I was going to take, where I was going to walk out of there and it wasn't going to faze me. But walking back to my car, my son, my oldest son, who was about 5 at the time, tugged on my hand, and I looked back and he's like, "Daddy, why didn't the main guy give us our food?" And that was a moment for me. It was one of the lowest points of just realizing that in trying to hustle, trying to hold things together, hiding from the world, making excuses, I was failing my family and I was letting them down in the worst way. And, that was kind of a wake up call. I had moments like that. I had a moment where at Christmas, my youngest son wanted a specific toy, he wanted a remote control motorcycle, and I couldn't find one anywhere that was under $300 at the time. I think all the cheap ones were sold out. And the only one I could find was at a hobby shop. It was like $300. I couldn't afford it. I thought, he wouldn't remember, he's 4, who needs a $300, you didn't need a $300 remote control motorcycle anyway, right? But still, I couldn't even find a cheap one. And I thought he wouldn't remember. Christmas morning, the first thing he says to me is he gets up and he's like wiping his eyes. He's like, "Dad, Santa brought my remote control motorcycle." And it just crushed me. And he goes to the tree, he runs out to the tree, and he's opening these little gifts that my wife and I got him. And he is throwing them to the side. He's just saying, "The next one will be my motorcycle. I know it." And the motorcycle wasn't there. And moments like that and Taco Bell, moments like my wife calling me from the grocery store crying because she couldn't pay for the cart of groceries she had. Her card wouldn't clear and there was nothing I could do about it. Her debit card, wouldn't go through and she'd have to leave the cart of groceries. Moments like that, if you've ever had a hard time, if you've ever hit rock bottom, I've been there. I can relate to you. I went through it. I have been at the highest of highs and then the lowest of lows. It was one of those things where at the time I thought I'd never recover. I made some hard judgment calls in those moments. I looked in the mirror, tried to do an assessment on what I was good at, what I knew, what I understood. And there's one thing about knowledge. I developed a skill. I developed a knowledge when I was doing real estate investing the first time around. No one can take that away from you. No one can take that knowledge away from you. And fear and stuff like that was holding me back from accepting that I had that ability. I had that knowledge. And so for a number of months and even years, I was trying to find a job or trying to hide and trying to run away from real estate because I thought it destroyed me. And when I finally hit rock bottom and I had to look in the mirror and take an accountability, that understanding that I had that knowledge was very powerful. Realizing that I could make a deal happen was really powerful because I'd done it before, but I was scared in that moment of, could it happen again? Could I recreate fire again? Right. Or, could I make it happen again? So at one of my lowest points, I put an ad on Craigslist and I basically said, experienced flipper looking for private money backer must be close enough to have a cup of coffee. And 6 people called. One person I ended up having multiple conversations with. The guy could talk and talk and talk. It was the craziest thing. It was like he, nicest guy in the world, but just talked. And I had multiple meetings with him where he never made a commitment to back me, and I was in one of the last meetings that I had with him before he backed me. I was sitting there at Starbucks about 3 hours into the conversation. I had to pee so bad but I didn't want to leave the conversation because I didn't want to offend him by interrupting him when he was talking. And I get a text from my wife that our water had been shut off. And it was in that moment that I just made the decision. I've gotten this far. I've gotten to this meeting. I can go home with my tail between my legs and fix this water problem. I can sit here until I close this guy. And I sat there until I got the guy to commit to backing me on a deal. And, I went out and that was around, I would say March or April of 2012. And by, I started negotiating or building relationships and networking with agents. By June of 2012, we bought our first deal. And by September, I'd sold it and made a $20,000 profit and split it with him. That was a deal we had. He put up the money and I do all the work. And I got 10 grand in my pocket and it was gone before I got it. I had bills to pay and stuff to do, but I was back in the game. It was proof of concept. And it was really neat because November 31st, October 31st, November 1st, we basically closed deals back to back and closed on 2. And then right after the first year, I closed on another one. And I did like 1 here, 2 there, 4 there, and just slowly built momentum in my business. So today we take properties like these and turn them into these. And we do over 100 rehabs a year. So we're at right now in a business is we do about 60-ish wholesale transactions a year, wholesale properties a year. And then we do around 120, 130 rehabs a year, kind of on average. We sit around the 200 deal mark per year. Pretty obviously COVID, COVID's definitely changed that a little bit. So, but, I went from basically nothing to doing, well over 100 plus transactions a year. I host a podcast now 4 years old. Flip Talk is 4 years old. October will be 4 years old. And then I also have a second podcast, Flip Talk Rookie Playbook. And what's cool about Rookie Playbook, it's evergreen at this point. We're not really updating episodes, but it takes you from week one. The very first episode is, what would you do if you had this crazy idea to be a real estate investor? What's the first thing you'd do? And we literally go week by week for 49 weeks in that episode, in that series. So Rookie Playbook's a great way for people who are brand new and they want to get some information about getting started. And of course, Flip Talk is interview based, and I talked to some wonderfully incredible investors around the country, made some incredible friends, and it's just a good time. So I have a mastermind community called the Inner Circle, where we basically pre-COVID met around the country, and we go to work on our businesses, we roll up our sleeves, and we do some really cool stuff. In fact, the last physical we did in January, we actually rented some high performance cars. We Lamborghinis. I think we had 4 Lamborghinis, 2 McLarens, stuff I would never buy in a million years, but I had a great time renting them, and we had a great time doing that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at today. So the biggest lessons I learned from 2008. First one is that the house always wins. One of my biggest mistakes in 2008 was that I felt like I was so good, right? I made a comment, everything I touched turned to gold. I felt like that I was so good at what I did, that it was me making money, and that I could beat the market. And I could, I had this attitude, drop me in any city in the United States at any time. And I hear it on Facebook now, people do the same thing, but I literally say this to people, drop me anywhere at any time and I'll make 10 grand like a week, no big deal. And that was my attitude. That was my arrogance. And, there's there's an underlining truth, right? There are always ways to make money in any market, but you got to be paying attention to what the market's doing. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on in the market, if you're not paying attention to the data and the information you have before you, you're going to lose. And so you can't bet against the house and win. You can't make things different than what they are. You can't sell a house, for 300,000 when it's only worth 2, right? If the market's going down type of thing. So you got to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on, that you're, getting the right information, that you're looking at the right data, and you're making the right decisions. Very important lesson for me. The second one was don't stay on an island, find your network. One of the biggest mistakes I think investors make to this day is they try to do everything alone. Facebook and, mastermind communities and the education courses and YouTube and stuff like that. That's how we had to do it, was on our own. When I started, YouTube was kind of barely a thing at that point in time. I think, I don't remember what year Google bought YouTube. But I remember the announcement, I think it was probably around 2005-ish or so. I was already a couple years in the game when that happened, when everything was in its infancy. So I didn't have the resources and the availability to Zoom like this with incredibly smart people, to go to meetings with incredibly smart people. That information wasn't as easily accessible. So, and that was one of the key points to my failure. So now it's very important that you find a network of people you can trust, that you can count on, whether they're local REAs or they're some kind of national group, and just make sure that you're in the group that really fits you and you have the right community. So basically, one of the things that I really learned in the last couple of years is that most of the growth that I've done, most of the lessons that I have benefited from are when I'm helping somebody else, when I'm teaching somebody else. And so you always need someone to teach and someone to chase. It's a motto that me and a buddy of mine live by. I have somebody I chase that, I set my goals and I want to be like somebody else, and I follow them. And then I also make sure that I'm helping people below me so that we can really grow our business substantially. It's important to understand for me that when somebody asks me a question, one of the things that I do in my head is I kind of beat myself up am I answering it the right way? Am I giving them the best information I can? Am I doing it the right way in my business? Could I be doing it better? And so what happens is I start doing that, making sure I'm giving the best answer possible. And my business ends up benefiting from that because I have these aha moments, right? So, being willing to help, being willing to teach is very important. And obviously having something to chase. The iceberg effect. What's right in front of your face isn't always the entire story. That was also a very important lesson that I learned from 2008, that it's not always what you see on the surface, just going back to having the right data and information and paying attention to the markets, looking at days on market, looking at, what's happening with appraisals. Right now there's a lot of markets that are hot, but they're not getting the appraisals, and stuff like that. So looking at, fundamentally what's going on, is very important. And a lot of us, I think, as real estate investors, especially newer real estate investors, take advantage of what's right in front of our face, and we don't dig in to stuff that can really help us and benefit us. So don't take anything for granted. And that was one of the most important lessons I learned. 2008 was a wake up call. It was something that I think that had a lot more people been paying attention to and not drinking the Kool-Aid, I think a lot of us would have seen it happening a lot sooner than we did. Here with 2020 and COVID-19, I feel like there's not as much data to predict on. That's one of my concerns. So my concerns about the current climate and how it relates to 2008 is that lack of historical data, that lack of what happened last time. That's something that gives me pause. I'm in my particular market, and I think a lot of the markets around the country are very similar. The housing market's on fire. You can't get a property right now without having to bid it up. The issues that people are running into are not being able to get appraisals, but the other issue that people are running into is once they sell their property, they're having a hard time finding someplace to go. We have record low rental availability. We have super, super tight inventory. And so that's causing people to pause on selling their properties. That's, COVID and, concerns about COVID are causing people to pause on selling their properties. So right now, the $1 million question for me is, while taking advantage of obviously the ability to sell properties at a very aggressive price point, how do you protect yourself as a rehabber when and if that changes? If they say tomorrow we have a vaccine, will the market flood with people ready to sell? And what would that do to the market? Would people still be hesitant to sell because they don't believe it, right? And they think that it's all hype or bull. So there's so many questions right now for me. And that's really my underlying concern is there isn't solid information to really make a decision on long-term. We don't know what governments are going to do to prop up the economy long-term. We don't know what the effects of all the money that's being pulled out of the economy by businesses struggling. We don't know what the effects are going to be on commercial right now. I know Chris has not, works from home at this point in time, had an office at one point and doesn't now. We're actually going virtual in our organization, and I no longer need a 3,000 square foot office. So I may be at least downsizing my office, if not going 100% virtual. What kind of effects and impact is that going to be on the commercial market? And then how is that going to unfold into other markets? So for me, there's a lot of questions. And so my biggest strategy at this point in time is just protect my downside. I am preparing for the worst constantly and hoping for the best. And right now it looks like preparing for the worst may not happen, but we still have a lot of things to unfold before us. California being one of the first states to lock down is now just recently within the last couple of days made it harder to reopen. Originally we had to hit, I think it was like 300, below 300 cases per day for 14 days. And now I think they dropped that. Maybe it was below 200 cases for 14 days. And now they dropped it to below 70 for 21 days. So they made it harder to reopen. So, how much of that stuff is going to change over the next few months and how much of an impact is it going to have with the overall economy? So for me, it's just that big question mark. And I am being super careful about how I'm spending money, super careful about how I'm hiring, super careful about the deals I'm getting into, making sure that I have capital reserves. That may cost me money if the market stays on fire, and that's okay with me, because I'd rather it cost me money because I made a mistake not to go all in than lose everything because I went all in. So that's where my head's at, and that's my thought process. So that was probably quicker than I expected it to be on this thing. But if anybody has any questions about anything I have said or anything that I have went through or anything I can share, I'm more than happy to answer them.
That was good, Don. So we did a panel podcast right when things were getting just crazy. And you were one of the guests on there. And I've been actually wanting to re-corral that party and do like a catch up. But in any case, I think every single one of us had some very serious concerns to a variety of degrees. And the downside, at least on the worst case from a real estate economy standpoint, hasn't happened. But there's still so many unknowns, like you mentioned, like the office space. We mentioned before the call started, like I think it was Pinterest that just basically paid $90 million just to say, we'll buy out of our lease. So the little small mom and pop offices, that's one thing. These big companies that can very easily go virtual and will probably stay largely virtual even when things open back up. That's just one little piece of the puzzle, and it's very concerning. So even though the downside hasn't necessarily happened as far as a macro level, there's so many questions, and a lot of people just don't know. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. And there's unintended consequences to it. I mean, just from, and again, every state's different. That's the one thing. It's like, just because you're feeling good in your state doesn't mean somebody else isn't struggling in theirs. For California, for instance, we're the first one to lock down. I've been very vocal about we're the first one to lock down. We're probably going to be one of the last ones to reopen. We have the highest number with that said, we have the highest number of COVID cases, I think confirmed COVID cases of any other state in the United States. We're one of the bigger ones, of course, but still we beat Texas, we beat Florida. And what we're seeing on the buy end is, sellers don't know where they're going to go. We have rent moratoriums, we have eviction moratoriums. If we buy properties, that, are tenant occupied, we have the potential of having, long drawn out extended stays of those tenants where we used to be able to work something out and get them out, or at least get them out within 6 to 8 weeks, right? And through an eviction process. So in this particular case, tenants are not really wanting to work with us a lot of the times. Sellers don't know where they're going to go if they're living in the property. So as an investor, even though the market's on fire, our time from the initial conversation to getting a seller in contract is extended. And so that does affect our bottom line. It's going to flush out in our pipeline at some point here. It's already starting to flush out in our pipeline. So some people in some states, I know I see on Facebook, they say they're on fire. Some people in some states are having the same struggle of having to pull the seller to the finish line. As a real estate investor, just because we can sell things right now for higher than what we expected, if we're having a hard time buying it or locking up in contract, it's not going to matter to us what we can sell it for, right? So that's where it's like there's all these unintended consequences right now that are underneath the radar, in some markets that we're all trying to figure out and make sure that we're making the right decisions for the long term and pivoting on marketing and stuff like that. I've been a big direct mail guy. I sent out 2 million postcards between 2018 and 2019. Right now, we're kind of with our toe in the water with direct mail because it's not really getting the same momentum that we got in our state pre-COVID. So.
And you bring up a good point too. As far as most metro cities in the United States, inventory has dropped between 30 and 35%.
Mm-hmm.
That's massive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, most of those metros, like the average home price has gone up dramatically over the last few months because there's less inventory, but the buyers are still wanting to take advantage of sub 3% interest rates.
Right.
And of course, if you're going to move, now you're moving with 30% less inventory and competing against a fairly motivated buyer pool. They're just bidding up prices. But that, even though those numbers sound good from a seller standpoint, like if you have the inventory and you can sell, great time. As long as you got somewhere else you're going to go. But otherwise, by the time you add up the numbers, it's actually not, because you're not getting the volume. You're in sale average price, but in total volume, that's still down.
It is. That's, how is that going to flush out for businesses, our types of businesses and real estate offices? I was in the market. I started in 2003. I was watching the market real close, 2001, 2002. And I got in and I got my first deal in 2003. And 2002, 2003, my wife and I were also looking for a house, which she was my wife at the time. She was my girlfriend. We got married in 2003, but we were looking for a house. And that was right when the market started to take off. .com bubble burst. They had lowered interest rates and stuff to really start to drive the market and using real estate to really pump the economy. And we're located in the Central Valley of California, so there's a lot of Bay Area money and Southern California money. So what happened was we had the cash from the Bay and the cash from Southern California flood our market, and it was impossible. I remember our market was shooting up like crazy. Home builders, you go walk through a property and you get some information on it. You come back the next week to make a decision, and it would be $20,000 or $40,000 higher on the price for the house. They'd be raising their prices the next week. It was nuts. And people were paying cash for properties. We were trying to buy a house, and we kept getting outbid by cash offers. And the point I'm trying to make is, back then it was like if you were an agent, you really didn't eat unless you were the listing agent, because if you had the listing, you were for sure going to get the commission. But if you didn't, there was 20 offers on the house. I don't see that happening yet, but it has the potential to do that. And, so there's just a lot of things to watch for. When inventory starts to flood the market again, how is that going to affect pricing? Is it going to stay the same? Is it continue to go up? Is it going to fall a little bit? If they raise the interest rates at all, we don't know who's going to get elected. And depending on who gets elected, they may do something different than what's being done now. Trump may stay in office and change his mind from what he's doing right now. We don't know any of that. If they raise the interest rate 1 point, how is that going to affect the pricing? Is it going to stay the same? Is it going to go down? So there's all these what ifs that for me, it's finding that balance of taking advantage of what's going on to its maximum fullest potential. I'm not saying hide under a rock by any means, but not exposing yourself to any liability to where if there's a massive change in any direction, you're not slitting your own throat. That's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah. And one little tangent is this whole issue is actually just added to the home affordability issue that was already a major issue in our nationally before COVID, and now it's just even worse. So, but yeah,
I wanted to open it up to other people too to ask any questions.
Yeah, if you got any questions
for us, since we have,
chime in or chat. Don't be shy.
You can type in your questions. Anything about real estate, honestly. I mean,
raising money, surviving storms.
I can talk about all of it. And the last thing I want to do is have a negative spin on this by any means. If somebody's been watching this on Facebook through the process, like I'm not a Debbie Downer. I'm not negative by any means in this. I love real estate investing. I think that if you're brand new in the space, I think this is the best time to start. There is going to be massive opportunities. Where they're going to unfold is, we're still kind of playing that game, guessing, right? But there's going to be massive opportunities for somebody who's newer, especially like, I have, I have an infrastructure and I have an office and I have a team and I have overhead. And so to be honest, somebody who's new or coming into this doesn't have all that baggage, so to speak, is going to have, you have this optimistic naivety that allows you to conquer the world. And I think as the opportunities unfold, you're going to have the ability to take advantage of them faster than some of us who have some of these bigger operations as far as, the pivot and the move and stuff like that. So I don't want to be that Debbie Downer and try to chase people away from the market. I think right now more than ever, for those of us who are running really good, solid businesses, and for those of you who are newer, the opportunities are going to be really, really good here. I think sooner than later.
Yeah, especially if you're able to hold hold properties for any length of time with the appreciation. This is not our strategy, but I tell people if you can find anything, at least in the Texas market, sub 200,000, you can practically pay retail and still do well long term. Your rates will be low, but from a wealth buildup and appreciation, it would be a good investment long term. Personally, we like buying at a discount.
Yeah.
But you made a good point too on newer folks coming in, both having lean operations. That's smart. Keep that lean mindset. There's a good book called Lean Startup, and it all talks about that, like staying lean. Like there's a lot of strength in that, but also not having the filters that experienced folks have and these extra lenses that we try to see through things through, that when things change, our vision gets a little clouded. Whereas the new person, you don't have all those blocks. And I noticed that running a sales team where I'd see new sales agents come in, they don't know anything other than there's opportunity. That's all they know. And they're willing to look and chase it wherever it is. And I've seen them time and time again outperform some very experienced agents. So in any case, yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on last minute. It was definitely a treat. And I know anyone watching this, they'll get a ton of value out of it. So how can people connect with you? And I think you've got do you have an event coming up?
Yeah, you can always find me on Facebook, just about anywhere. I have an event called the Flip Talk Virtual Summit. So you can fliptalkvirtualsummit.com, where it's basically a 3-day event where we will break down from lead generation to talking and negotiating with sellers, and then obviously getting the check. It's going to be a really cool deal. We have a number of speakers that are going to be part of that, people that I know and trust and run some really solid businesses. And we're going to be breaking down just the mechanics of all of it and really getting people the tools they need to make some deals happen. So fliptalkvirtualsummit.com. You can find me on Instagram at the real Don Costa, and then you can always email me questions at don@fliptalk.com. I will respond with questions. And I know this was kind of a high level overview conversation, but I do enjoy getting into the basics as well. I'm always tweaking my business with new marketing ideas and tactics and tricks. So I do enjoy answering those questions.
Yeah.
Awesome. And right before we exit, we are going to be having Stephen back. Stay tuned for details on that. But next month, first Tuesday, I think that's October 6th, but first Tuesday of the month, Multifamily Investing 101. We're going to be going over the ins and outs of multifamily investing and actually running through a case study with some really cool guys that have bought, I don't even know how many units. They had like 400 units in the first 2 years. I don't know what they're at now. He actually just picked up 2 more complexes this week. So stay tuned for that. You can find more information later on at REHacking.com/REHacking-live. And did you have something else?
No, that's pretty much it. Unless if anybody else had any other questions or wanted to introduce
I
yourself.
have a question.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm a real estate investor, but I have not purchased a property in quite a while. Just kind of been holding on to the ones that I have and leasing them out or owner financing them. And so now I am considering doing some more active investing, primarily because I would like to help my 2 adult children kind of get their feet wet with real estate. And so one question I do have is for the Houston market and possibly Austin, if you know anything about the Austin market. What are some ways that have been effective in targeting homeowners? When I was purchasing properties, I targeted the pre-foreclosure list, and that was pretty effective. But are you just doing kind of a general mail out, or are you targeting a specific group and then mailing out? What has been the, marketing strategy that has worked for you?
Yeah, this is an entire presentation in itself. The one advice I would have is the tactical methods are always evolving. The basic strategies of creating a value proposition that's so compelling that they would only go with you, that's evergreen. That'll always work. So I guess in quick case in point is you mentioned pre-foreclosure. There's a couple reasons why pre-foreclosures are horrible things to go after right now.
I understand why now.
Yeah, but it's good to illustrate it because you can do this as one, it's an easy list.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It's a very popular list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's low inventory. At least as of right now, is low inventory.
Right now, yes.
And then what's your value proposition? If it's I can pay cash and close quickly, well, I mean, so can everyone else. So easy list, that means everyone's going to be doing it.
Right.
Everyone is doing it. And then it's going to be very crowded with a value proposition that's not unique. So what I would just say is, regardless of the tactical, figure out your value proposition. Just really think about that. And you don't even have to stay within real estate. You know what you're doing in real estate, but look at what value propositions that other companies that you really admire and they have a good message, and you can see how they can captivate you and draw you in, and see how they do that. Yeah. And mimic that with what you're trying to go after, and then you'll be at that point unique. Because that way when you're messaging them, it's not the same old stuff. It's, well, this one's different.
Yeah, so try to set yourself apart from other people, other investors.
I would chime in there. I started in 2003, 4, and 5 door knocking. That's what I did. Door knocking, pre-foreclosures.
I've done that too.
Yeah. Door knocking, pre-foreclosures. I think is if you're going to do that list, that's really the only way to do that list because there is so much competition on it.
Right.
One of the things that I did learn about that list through door knocking and tax default is people will sell to the person they like and trust regardless of the number when they're in foreclosure. You got to show them that you can solve their problem, and they got to feel good about you being the one they can count on. And that transcends numbers. That's because they finally pulled their head out of the sand and realized they had a problem, and now they need somebody to take that fear away. So if you're willing to door knock and spend the time doing that, then I still think, and granted there is more competition now than there was when I was doing it, but there was still a tremendous amount of competition when I was doing it. I still think that's a great way to go. If you're going to try to cold call it, or you're going to try to send mail to it, I think that's a waste of time and money. But I think if you're going to actually be face-to-face, belly-to-belly, and which is a little harder in COVID, but if you're actually going to take that step, I still think it's a valuable list to try to target, but you're just going to have to be willing to take that extra step.
Right. And I did do door knocking, and it was very effective, but towards the end, the market was really, especially Houston area, was starting to get very, very overcrowded with investors. Mm-hmm. But specifically for Houston, what approach are you guys taking? Are you doing a mail out to just a specific area? Are you doing the door knocking? What has been a strategy that has worked for you guys, Chris?
So seemingly like Don, we started off door knocking, pre-foreclosures, and that was our first deal. Netted like $100,000 on that deal. It was amazing. We bought it for $70,000. Tried doing that in Sugar Land today.
Yeah.
No, we're much more ninja because it got to the point where we were getting $2-3 grand in marketing spend for every deal, but that went up to like $5 grand and then $7 grand. And then at the point where it's just like, and then of course margins have shrunk. So it's like, that's, financial suicide to continue that trend.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to be a little bit more strategic and ninja about it. A multi-layered approach as far as tactically, whether it's mail, call, text, Facebook, but also really focusing in on our value proposition. So we just want to make sure that once we've connected with them and built trust with them, we are unlike any other experience that they've ever had with any other investor. And I get mail from other investors. We get them from our rentals, so we know what they're sending.
Right.
So it's not difficult to be different.
But over time, since we bought so many houses too, it's kind of realigning or reevaluating who you're marketing to, because we found whenever we were, sending a lot of mailers, we never got a single buy over here on this part of the map, but we're getting a ton on this side. So it's really, you have to evaluate, I guess, your closed deals to see where they're biting too. So that's where whenever he was saying like multi-layering, we kind of make sure we hit different pockets of Houston that we know are biting, and even the outlining parts of Houston too.
Yeah, a little smaller communities.
The smaller communities that nobody wants to drive out to. I mean, that's where we're getting a lot of deals too. So, and once we see we're getting deals there, then we keep marketing right there, until it's called the blue ocean strategy.
Yeah.
Are you using wholesalers very much?
No.
Well, no.
Sometimes.
We just bought 2 from wholesalers, so.
Oh, I didn't know you were talking about.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, yes, when it makes sense, but I'm not we can't build a business strategy around wholesalers.
Yeah.
They're able to sell at a much higher price. It makes sense. That's just what the market pays. But if you want to use wholesalers, use brand new ones. Teach them what to do. Let them be your bird dogs. They'll come back. Eventually, if they're smart, they'll figure it out. And then that's just the evolution of business. But if you can do that systematically, you'll have a decent deal flow over time.
I've heard driving for dollars. A lot of investors still do that.
Right.
And yeah, I've heard that is still working here in Houston as well. We don't really do that just because.
Well, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, very time.
Yeah, I try not to trap my kids in the car too long. So that's torture. So.
All right.
What's working in your market, Don, in terms of finding motivated sellers?
We're cold calling at this point in time. We're doing direct mail, modified direct mail campaign compared to what we used to do. And then we're cold calling and text messaging. So kind of layering it on is the same thing. Okay. I run a bigger operation now, so we don't door knock, although there's a part of me that wants to go back out and do it. I loved it. If I got you to talk to me, it didn't matter what the competition was. That's why I'm so gung ho on door knock, because it didn't matter who I was competing against. If I got you to like me and listen to me, I was going to get your house if you're going to sell. We do cold calling, text messaging, direct mail. We do work with newer wholesalers as well. I very openly will teach people how to wholesale. I know that they're good for a handful of deals before they find somebody that's going to pay more, and that's okay. I feel like it's a fair trade. So creating those relationships, teaching somebody how to generate lead gen and to go out and lock up deals is a great way to get deals. Just know at some point they're going to be your competition. So we use a combination of all that. So
okay. Thank you.
Googling for dollars too. A lot of people don't realize that if you're paying attention to Google and you go up and down neighborhoods, so you put in an address and you can actually go up and down neighborhoods, and you just look and see how current the date is for when they took that street view. A lot of street views are fairly current, and you can actually do your driving for dollars through Google instead of getting in the car and driving. It's a neat little trick as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Don.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
That's about our time. So thank y'all so much, and we hope to see you at the next event.